Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1064B, and today's date is September 1st, 2016, and the title of the episode is, Did Obama Create an Executive Order for the Collapsing Economy? Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, in the past week or two, we've been talking about George Soros and how these leaked documents were out there about his Open Society Foundation. And we realized that he was behind, and still is behind, the refugee crisis in Europe with Obama at the UN. We also realized that he's behind Black Lives Matter. These documents also show us that he wants to regulate the internet and control free speech. And very interestingly, is that the leaked documents also show that he was using Black Lives Matter, that movement, to ultimately federalize the America's police forces. Now, the document is called Police Reform: How to Take Advantage of the Crisis of the Moment and Drive Long-Term Institutional Change in Police Community Practice. The document states that the Foundation's U.S. programs was seeking to use this moment, meaning the so-called crisis in policing following high-profile shootings and charges of racism, to create a national movement for police reform. Now, what they want to do is they want to take away the local police. They want to give them grants. They want to federalize them and have them centrally controlled by the government. And we can see there are more than 30 police departments across the nation that have fallen under the federal oversight following some of these incidences. And what they like to do is get the entire country controlled by the federal government. Now, they do use blackmail, where they say, listen, you need to do what we say, or you're not going to get your federal funds. They also do this with education. But we can see all of these things that are being ginned up here, they are part of an agenda. Now, you have to say to yourself, why would they want to federalize the police forces? Why would they want to control the police forces all the way down to the local level? Well, think about it. When the system implodes, which it's not if, but when it implodes, and everything comes to a screeching halt, they need control of the situation. The federalized police forces will be taking orders from the government to control the situation. So they don't need to put troops on the ground. They don't need to do a lot of this because they already have police forces already in position to take orders and to do what the government wants. And most of them won't even question it. They will just do it. And we can see this is where they are headed, because we can see around the world, a lot of the governments in many of these countries, they're preparing for this economic collapse. Because we know there's going to be riots. We know that deliveries are going to freeze up. People aren't going to be able to get their money. People aren't going to understand what is happening, because we were just in this middle of this recovery. And everything was supposed to be fine. Where did this come from? So we can see this is the agenda for all of this, to control the situation. Now, we see from other documents that there is a secretive warfare occurring in Latin America. U.S. Special Operation Forces are training in Latin America, and they have tripled between 2007 and 2014. Now, this document was obtained by the Human Rights Advocacy Organization, and they are realizing that over the past 8 years, nearly 4,000 U.S. Special Forces have trained 13,000 Latin American security forces at a cost of $73 million. Now, the question is what is this all about? What is the mission? Who exactly is the U.S. training? Are they implicated in human rights abuses? Is it now the U.S. military crafting U.S. foreign policy? And where is the public oversight to all of this? It's completely non-existent. But we can see down in South America the reason why they might be doing this. Look what's happening in Venezuela. Pressure from the United States government central bankers to squeeze them until they give and hopefully have regime change there. Look what's happening in Brazil. And we can see they might have been training all of these individuals for these purposes. They've done it in other countries. Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, Ukraine, and many others. And that's a situation we're going to have to watch here. We see the sole American manufacturer of cluster bombs. Well, they stopped producing them because there was a lot of pressure from international rights groups which have said that the U.S.-made munitions were used by Saudi military during airstrikes in Yemen and killed a lot of women, a lot of children. And the company that was making them, it is called Textron Systems. It's a Rhode Island-based company, and they decided to stop the manufacturing. And you have to remember something very important. The United States has neither signed nor ratified the 2008 Convention on Cluster Munitions. So they're not part of this ban. They never went ahead and ratified it or signed it. And we can see right now they were using these weapons to put pressure on the people inside of Yemen, saying, listen, you will do what we say. You will install the puppet government, allow them back into the country, or we're going to make you suffer. This is exactly what was going on in Yemen. But the Houthis, the people, they are fighting back, because when you push individuals into a corner and they have nothing else to lose, and they're fighting for a cause, for their country, for their fellow citizens, they will continually fight until the very, very end, and they will not give up. Saudi Arabia, the U.S., they really don't have anything in this except for oil, control of this country, the central bank, the petrodollar. And this is why the U.S. is having a problem in all of these countries, because the people are rising up. And it's getting harder and harder to control the situation. Now, out in Ukraine, we see that the situation is deteriorating right now. And, of course, the corporate media, the U.S. government, they're trying to make it seem like nothing's going on there because they don't report anything that's going on out in Ukraine. But we can see right now the U.S. Treasury, they have expanded their sanctions on Russia for its activities in Ukraine. And they're expanding their sanctions because their terrorist attack in Crimea, their shelling in the southeastern area of Donbass, of Ukraine, is not going as planned. Right now, the Ukrainian troops, they've received 1,000 night vision devices from the U.S. And we can see right now the U.S. is out there. And this is a very odd thing to say. They have unveiled a plan where if Russia invades Ukraine, the U.S. says the U.S. and Ukraine are ready with this plan. They've discussed this with the Germans, with the French, the Poles, the British. And if the worst happens and a full-scale invasion of Ukraine occurs, a plan is ready, which tells us that the U.S. and Ukraine, they're preparing to initiate this fight. They're prepared to push this forward with some type of false flag, hoping that Russia will come in and start fighting in Ukraine. And their plan is war. That's their plan. We see right now that Obama, he is extending the Libyan war for another 30 days. All U.S. warships will stay in the area. The USS Carney, well, that is close enough to be seen from the shore. And we can see right now, we've been talking about the United States going into Libya for quite a while. And we knew from all the indicators from the French doing reconnaissance, from having special op teams inside of Libya, we can see right now they try to put in a unity government. The unity government really can't do anything in there because the parliament rejected them twice already. And it really should be dissolved. But we can see right now the U.S. is prepared to keep this going until they control the country once again. And as we look at the entire situation, we see that the United States government and the central bankers, they cannot control the situation in the Middle East. And their biggest fear is that the people will take over the country, remove the puppet governments, get rid of the private Western Central Bank, and stop dealing in the dollar. They will no longer sell the oil using the dollar. This is what they're trying to prevent right now, because once this happens, the system implodes automatically. No ifs, ands, or buts, it just collapses. So they're holding this off long enough, as we can see out in Ukraine, to get a war started. As we can see out in the Pacific, to get a war started. As we can see out in Syria, to get a war started. And what we're seeing right now is this major push. Now, something very interesting with this whole voting system, where, they were talking about how the voting system was hacked. It's coming from North Korea, it's Russia, and they keep changing it around of who's doing what. But they just want people to know that it's a foreign entity that is hacking our system. Now, prior to this hack, DHS came up with a plan to centralize and to control the voting system. And then all of a sudden, a couple weeks after, there was a hack. Now remember, they only do things to push their agenda along. So they needed this hack to push DHS' plan forward. And it's very convenient how the timing and how this occurred, because we realized that DHS also came out and said, listen, we will also monitor the voting systems while the election's going on to detect malware, to detect anyone inside of the system. So they've had these plans from the beginning. They want to centralize. Central banks like to centralize things, which means they like to control everything from the top. And why would they want to control this? Well, they can control the outcome of the election. It's much easier to control the entire situation. And to push this even further, I see in the corporate media, they're still playing up Zika, of course, but they're starting to come out with a new term called Zika zones. And they're running polls now where they're saying Americans are afraid to go into the Zika zones. And they started going into saying, well, these Zika zones are in certain states like Florida, New York, and many others that are being infected right now through the Gulf. And this might interfere with elections, because if we have people that are afraid to go into these zones, well, the elections might have to be postponed. So we already see that propaganda out there. We also see the propaganda for a cyber attack on the voting system. Now let's take all of that and think about Obama. Well, we can see right now that the corporate media was playing up, hey, maybe Obama would be in there for a third term. And of course, Obama said, no, I don't want to have a third term. Usually when people do this type of thing where they say, no, I really wouldn't want to do it, I don't want to, but if I was asked, of course I would continue. And out of nowhere, and this is coming from Rob Kirby, who heard it from Jim Willey, And Ron Kirby was being interviewed by Elijah Johnson on Finance and Liberty. And something very interesting, at the end of Obama's term, he created this new executive order. And the executive order is on the order of succession in the Treasury Department. Okay, let's read what this says. It says, Section 1. Subject to the provisions of Section 3 of the executive order, the officers named in Section 2 in the order listed shall act as and perform the functions and duties of the office of Secretary of the Treasury during any period when both the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury have died, resigned, or are otherwise unable to perform the functions and duties of the office of the Secretary. Now, the question we have to ask is, why would Obama do this at this point in time? He's at his last term here. A new president will be coming in. We know during the fall there's going to be elections, and then come January there's going to be a new president. Why didn't they wait for the new president? And this has to do with the Treasury Department, the order of succession. So let's think about this for a second. If the economy collapses this fall, and I'm just looking at the indicators, I'm not saying it's going to, but a lot of the indicators are pointing towards this point in time, and he postpones the election, or lets the elections go through, doesn't make a difference, because he's still president until January, and everything falls apart. Let's say there was some type of blast where the Treasury Department was hit, where they can say, because of this physical attack, the economy is suffering. This executive order, to me, stands out as, here we go, this is for the economic collapse. And we're going to use this executive order because we know something is going to happen in the Treasury Department. Now, maybe the system dies and collapses and the head of Treasury resigns. And maybe something happens to the next person in line. And this is why they have this, because the entire system is collapsing and people are just running for the hills. Or there was a physical attack in the Treasury and these individuals who were together got hit, which then they can say, since they got hit, we need to close the banking system, we need to close down certain things, the economy is suffering. So when we look at this, it tells us that something is going to happen during this period. Or maybe they are planning for something and they're making sure that everything is lined up for this time period. Now remember, these individuals, they come up with a lot of plans. Some of them work out, some of them don't, but they always keep their goals. And to me, if they get the green light, we can see something actually happening. So when we see this, especially now, he did this in August 12th of 2016. In August of his last term, when we know elections are coming up, something is off right now. And when we look closely at this, this is another indicator telling us that something could be happening during this time period. Because we have DHS who want to control the elections, centralize the elections. We have Zika zones. We have this executive order. We have this cyber attack. The United States is losing control in the Middle East. The petrodollar is under threat. And the economy is rapidly deteriorating, and it is declining and collapsing very quickly. And we can see all of this is happening at once. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.